Tell me about you.
All right. Well, I'm originally from Switzerland and I now live in Australia. And I guess I came to Australia via many winding roads, you could call it, or the oceans. So I ended up traveling at some stage to the Caribbean. And I left Australia, went on a sailing adventure, fell in love in the Caribbean, and ended up living there. And this was a 15-month period that was really turbulent and exciting and also very challenging. And when I came back to Australia, I decided to write a book about it. So the book is called Change of Course. I've got it here. And it was published last year in June. So it's been a little less under a year. And, for anyone out there that's tried to write or is in the process of writing and publishing, it's a huge accomplishment for me to hold my book in my hands today. And it's another type of adventure, the publishing journey. So yeah, it's something that I've enjoyed doing, both the physical adventure and writing the book and publishing it.
Well, if we can dive into both of those adventures, and first, if you wouldn't mind telling us your, quite frankly, pretty cool and amazing travel stories, because everybody loves a travel story, especially me, and like, you're not really an Australian if you don't like a good travel story. And could you give us a couple of insights that it taught you, that travels overseas, that taught you, and then if you wouldn't mind explaining to us the second journey, which is getting published, which was kind of amazing in and of itself.
Okay. So like I said, I was at the time living in Australia with my long-term ex-partner, a Swiss man. And our relationship had been floundering for a couple of years. So, we got to the point, he had a really good job and we were living in a small village in South Australia, and I just couldn't get a job for myself because every business there was family owned and operated. And we sort of decided this was the perfect opportunity for me to pursue my dream. And, I have to admit that the dice fell in my favor because the decision was made that he would stay in his job at home whilst I could venture out and fulfill my dream of sailing a major ocean. And we'd also utilize that time apart to sort of figure out where our lives would be heading from then on. So, I'd heard about, first I always assumed that sailing the world is only available, to wealthy people. And I'm not one of them. So I always sort of longingly thought about it. And it wasn't until I actually read Jesse Martin's book, Lionheart. He was one of the youngest solo circumnavigators around. And he mentioned crewing on other people's yachts. And I still remember when I read those lines, it really rocked my world, because up until then, like I said, I thought this was a thoroughly unachievable dream. So I flung the book aside and I went online and I found these crewing websites. I put my profile up and I waited for responses. And I got, emails from far-flung corners of the world. There was a guy sailing from New Zealand to Chile. There was a family cruising the Pacific. There was just anything was out there. So, of course, having agreed to a certain time, I selected a boat that was interesting. So it was a fairly old, built in the 70s, a cruiser racer. And which would have been good for me to learn sailing. And also the boat was just about the longest trip that was offered to me. So we would have sailed from the Caribbean all the way back to Australia through the Panama Canal, which, that's another bucket list thing to do. So I bought a one-way ticket to the Caribbean and I went onto the boat. and it was all looking pretty good for a few weeks. But we had a very cantankerous owner. He was, you know, not the most sociable person, and tension aboard over the weeks where we got the boat ready for this big passage sort of boiled over, and eventually the trip fell apart. So I never got to actually sail the Pacific. So I found myself in the Caribbean stranded. And of course, you know, every Sunday night, whilst we got that first boat ready, we would go to these sunset parties on a cliff overlooking the ocean, and we would drink rum punches and dance to, you know, Caribbean music and watch the sunset behind the mountains. And I met a local man, and I just was really conflicted because I was in a relationship, and yet there was this man that was so very alluring and so different to the man I was in a relationship with. And I kept battling it, and eventually I had to leave the island because of my visa issues. So I found another boat, and I sailed across the Atlantic, and that was a really exciting passage, very sort of heavy weather, big waves, a lot of wind. Was a steep learning curve for me. And of course, once I got to Europe, I met up with my long-term partner, who was by then in Switzerland. And we ended the relationship. And so that was a major chapter for me in my life, because we had been together for 13 years. I'd always had someone by my side. Suddenly I had very little money. I didn't know where to go. I didn't really have a home in Australia. And I had a romance that was pending in the Caribbean. You know, so of course, what do? You go back to the Caribbean, even if it doesn't really make sense. So that's what I did. And I just sort of decided, you know, I had a few $1,000s in my pocket, and I just thought I make the best of it. And you know, I got a job relatively quickly, and I was immensely proud to sort of have, you know, made a life in a new island. I was also living in a very small community. I was the only white person in the community, which was also a really interesting experience for me, and an eye-opening experience also. And I was living in a maybe 3 by 5 meter wooden shack. We had no electricity. It was pit toilet in the backyard, and sort of a rickety shed for where we could have bucket showers. You know, so my life completely changed. I was doing laundry by hand, and I stood out wherever I went. But I also felt really alive, and I felt really actually accepted by the community. So, you know, that was a really challenging but rewarding experience. I just want to kind of give you an overview of the story. So, yes, navigating that time. So it was a 15-month period when I left Australia to eventually, you know, traveling onwards from the Caribbean. And for me, sort of the guiding emotions, or the guiding lines throughout the story is really about, you know, doing what your heart tells you to do, not being afraid to really step out of your comfort zone and give something a go. And also about resilience. You know, it was really the first time in my life where I was completely by myself. There was no smartphones back in the day, so I didn't even have a laptop. I was completely isolated. I was struggling with a corrupt employer, with illness, you know, when I didn't have health insurance. I nearly got deported. You know, lots went on, and I had to adjust my plans over and over again. and everything always worked out, you know. So it's for me, the reason I started writing the book. So now let's go into the publishing, the second part. The reason I started writing the book wasn't to actually get a book published. It was really about just writing down the story as I best remembered it for myself, because I often thought about this time with a kind of, you know, a chuckle, you know, at all the weird and wonderful situations that I encountered, and I didn't want to forget them. So I began writing the story in 2017, and I decided to really commit to it. So I wrote 1,000 words a day, and I didn't do that every day, but you know, sort of most days. And I had it finished by the end of June. So then it took another 3 months to do a full edit. And then I really didn't know what to do with it, because it actually, to me, it looked like it could be a book, but I wasn't sure. You know, when you finish writing something, you always have a lot of self-doubt, and you think, oh, you know, maybe it's just crap.
Well, it wasn't, because I've read extracts, but I'd really like to jump in and ask a question, because that's amazing on a number of levels. But one of them is the personal insight level, because we live in a narrative, which is to say that we live in a story that we create about ourselves and the world around us. And we project that story in the present. We have that story in the present, but we project that story forward and backward. Now, when you were writing things, did you find that when you sat down and wrote things down, your perception of them, or even your experience of those events, because you're re-experiencing something when you're writing, did that change at all?
I'm just trying to think how to put it. You know, it's easy to write something and be neutral about it. You know, like to sort of say, I ate this and we did that, and you know, blah 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 blah. But there's no emotion in there, and there is no sort of introspection in there. So for me, what really started happening once I started writing, because I didn't want to write just a travel report. I wanted to write how, you know, I felt and what I experienced.
Yeah.
And I realized, you know, that's also just my perspective. Other people's perspectives might have been different during that time. But what it really turned out, you know, and some of the sections in the book where it's very personal, either in the romance or, you know, my I was going through a lot of guilt and shame about, you know, falling in love with someone else when I was technically in a relationship.
Yeah.
And or with my parents, I had quite a difficult relationship with my parents at the time. So I can only say that, you know, certain scenes you write once, and then you go back and you rewrite, and you rewrite, and you rewrite, and it's really cathartic, and it turns into kind of a neutral story. So I guess the times that you keep going over and over and over is also healing, and it gives you this distance. So today, you know, when I look at the book, and some people might come back to me and say, oh wow, you know, and that was a bit strange or out there, and I sort of go, yes it was, but you know, it's my story and I'm okay with it. And that's what writing does, I think.
That's a fantastic insight. But the other thing I like about that is it's a recognition of how we view the world. Now, I'm a former police officer, so writing reports is something that I understand. As you've pointed out, what writing reports is something, what report writing is something very different from writing a novel or like when you write a report, you're not actually supposed to write a narrative. To do this happened, 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 and let the other person who's reading it, which is normally like it might be an investigator, if like, so if the really, you know, if it goes going to the CIB, the investigator will read it and kind of understand what happened. Or normally, like if you've arrested someone and you're doing the court report, the magistrate or a judge, you know, a judge and jury can draw their own conclusions and write their own
Mm.
in their own heads. Now, that's a very, very, very different thing. That forensic description is a very different thing from writing experience, because experience, to a certain degree, is subjective. It's how you felt.
Mm.
It's not so much what happened to you, how you experienced it. And those are two very different things. Because I can say from taking statements from people that I knew were at an event, sometimes you'd be taking a statement like, so what happened? What happened? What happened? Like, a reasonable person sometimes would pick up these two different statements and go, were these people at the same event? And the answer to that question was yes. And it's, you know, obviously the next question is, well, were they lying? Like, who's lying here? And the answer to that question is no one. Just experienced things very, very differently. And they took things away very, very differently. And you can even see that in documents as old as the Bible. Like, you know, you've got the Gospels. Like, one is written from, you know, Luke was a physician. So you've got this really kind of like healing, physician-y kind of like feel. And then you've got, you know, you've got these other perspectives. And like, they're all reporting the same thing.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, but it's just that they experienced it and took different things away from that, you know, from the experience. I'm sure it's the same. I'm sure it's the same with you. And I've really noticed, you know, when you tell your story and you're at your book events, and I've been a couple of times now. I do recommend to anyone out there listening, if you see Regina, and I'll put all the hyperlinks there. But if you see her advertising one of her book events, do go, because it's genuinely splendid to see. But that's one of the things that I took away: this understanding between a forensic description and a description of experience. That really resonated with me when I was listening. Frankly,
I mean, also, you know, you have to remember, like, so my book's a memoir, right? And I'm writing about my difficult relationship with my parents. And my father passed away last year, but whilst I was writing, he was still, you know, with us. And my mom is, of course, alive. And so, you know, for me, the big thing was, I want to write honestly about my experience around, you know, some challenging moments I've had with my parents, but I'm also not here to put them down or to hurt them. So that's a very fine line. And that was, so these are all passages that you spend countless hours on them, working and reworking it to make sure that it's okay. You know, you can stand behind it and it still reflects the truth.
When you were doing that, the truth. Yeah, I don't want to sound like Pontius Pilate here, but it's true. But like,
that's right. It's my truth in my book, right?
Yeah.
I think I've written that in the front, actually.
And look, you know, there's kind of like, I mean, God, that's another entirely. That's it. You know, there's a philosophical discussion there that, you know, perhaps we should actually have. But did you find that?
I found it.
Oh, okay. You got to give it to us. You got to give it to us.
I said, but even after the last words have been typed, edited, and printed, change of course simply holds this: recollections of my personal perspective and its subjective truth.
Yeah.
That's it.
Spot on. So when you were rewriting things, did you find that it changed your perspective? Like, did your perspective change from when you were experiencing it at the point to when, you know, you were reflecting on it later on?
I don't think it's the perspective that changed, but it's the emotions around it. So, you know, when you are experiencing something, and usually those complicated situations, the emotions are quite elevated. But when you write about it, and remember, it's been, 10 years since it happened. So initially there would still be maybe some discomfort, you know, like I remember most moments squirming, where I was like, oh, do I really have to write this? But then it was like, yeah, you know, I don't just want to, I'm not here to whitewash myself. I actually need to also write the uncomfortable stuff about my experience. But the more I wrote about it, the more the emotion went, you know, and it just became like watching a neutral, you know, a movie or someone else's story. And that's sort of, for me, where I look at it and I really appreciate the memories, but there's no emotional entanglement in there anymore.
Well, in a lot of ways, that's very powerful and very much experience, because, you know, there's this beautiful idea that we let our ideas and our ideas die instead of ourselves. And you do that through a movie. So, for example, if you watch a movie where someone is going through some sort of moral dilemma, look, it could be something like Star Wars, where they're just going on a hero's journey. You know, you can actually, you're kind of like living through that person, and to a degree, you're experiencing a degree of the emotion. Like, it's not a good movie if you're getting, but there is still that, there's enough distance, as you've pointed out, to allow you to learn something from it. Not only, you know, you're pulling out those learnings from what you've done. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And I think that's why and I do recommend your book. I think that's why, you know, your book is good, because it has that degree of introspection to it and allow you to learn lessons about yourself, and vicariously people reading it learn lessons about. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I read mainly in the genre memoir myself because I enjoy it. Like you say, I enjoy reading about other people's, you know, experiences, and they can be adventures, but they more often, I think, adventures are also challenges, or, you know, and they are tied to emotional struggle. But at the end of the day, that is what makes life so rich, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's, as you, I don't know if you've ever written fiction, but when you write fiction, one of the things that's hammered into you is that you've got to have a character arc. Your character has to have an arc, so that at point A they get to point B. Like, how, you know, what struggles do they go through, what learn to get to get from that. And I think that you get, like, anyone who sits down, when you live your life, you're always going to get a character arc. But when you sit down and specifically articulate it and think it through and write it down, that's really got to bring that character arc into high resolution and high, so rather than just an experience. So that's, you know, that's uber cool. But I've got to ask, okay, did your parents read your book?
So it's written in English. So because my mother tongue is Swiss German, it's not actually, you know, so proper German is to me quite a different language, and I couldn't write it in proper German. So I chose to write in English, and I really love actually the English language. To me, it's much more refined. It's subtler, you know, you can describe things better, at least for me. So no, they haven't read it. You know,
which sounds like it's probably a good thing, because there's some really tough Christmas dinners after that. Like, you know,
look, the thing is, there isn't actually that much in there about my parents. I mean, there is a few scenes here and there, but it's not a book about my parents. I sort of debated, you know, my father since passed, so he's not concerned about it anyway. But my mother, I think she was, just before it came out, she was getting a little bit concerned, because of course now the book is actually in bookshops in my hometown, so her friends have bought it, have read it. I think the feedback generally to her has been that it's very enjoyable, and it's a decent book. I sort of thought about translating the sections where she's in, and then I thought, no, that's really taking things out of context. You know, like, I can't give her a situation where maybe we have conflict, and then she'll only hear about the conflict. She'll think the whole book is like that, and it's not.
Yeah,
you know, it might be 2-3 sentences. So I actually left it to her, and I thought, at the end of the day, like I've said many times, it's my perspective. It might not be hers, and that's fine. It's going to go out the way it is. And I think, you know, there's with memoir, I think there is a level where you have to become okay with the story, because if you write a memoir to satisfy everyone that's in it, there's not going to be any friction.
Yeah.
There's no arc, you know. So
Yeah.
by nature, there will be something, and you know, that's just how it is. I mean, she's proud of me now. She really, I think she's realized I haven't actually bad-mouthed her. You know, I really haven't. But for me, I'm quite a sensitive person. So for me, it was really, really important to get this right. And as a first-time writer, you don't really have much guidance. So that's why it also took me a lot of time to get it right.
Yeah. You don't want to be a Swiss Prince Harry. Would you mind continuing telling us about the publishing journey?
The publishing, okay. So once I had done that first edit, for me, what happened, I had to first figure out what I wanted to do with the book. So I tried to pitch it to some agent and publishing houses in Australia. And here, you know, I approached it very much like a Swiss person. I went one after one, and it's a lengthy process, and I didn't get anywhere, and I didn't have any success. And so after a while, I sort of ran out of patience, and I ended up deciding, that's when COVID started. So I was working as a cruise attendant here in Cairns, and I was, of course, put on, or, you know, stood down and put on JobKeeper, which, you know, was a huge blessing for me. And I used the time to hire a professional editor. So what I did is I hired an Australian lady. Again, it's really important when you publish a book or you get it professionally edited, that you hire someone that's, first of all, experienced in your language, and that's experienced in your genre. So if you know, if you publish a romance fiction, you have to get a romance fiction specialized editor. Otherwise, it's just not, a cross genre is really different style of writing. So she was fantastic. That was really, really fun and quite intense. So she would, for example, highlight a lot of my writing where I had just been a bit too descriptive, but not included the emotion. So there was a lot of, but how did you feel there? And what were you thinking? And, you know, also very specific, what were you eating? Or, you know, what did the surrounds look like? Because I think when you're writing, especially when you're writing your own story, I know what things looked like and what it tasted like and what it felt like, but I need to actually give that over to the reader, right? I need to convey that message or draw the picture. So that was the first step. Now, after that, I had a finished manuscript, and there is a great service from the Australian Society of Authors where they offer a literary speed dating. So you can book yourself in and for a few sessions. So I think nowadays you can get 2 sessions, and it's only, I think, $55. So it's really cheap, and you can book with a publishing house or an agent that is specifically looking for books in your genre. So that was really amazing. I did a course on how to pitch properly. I wrote my pitch. I practiced and practiced and practiced. And, you know, then you get 3 minutes and you launch straight into it. And I got really good feedback on my pitch, but I didn't get any takers. And, you know, it's not even a taker to publish, it's a taker to read the manuscript, right? So when no one even, you know, and most of them really said at the end, oh, that was a fantastic pitch. And then I didn't hear back. And I thought, well, it's just hard to get out there with a memoir, or it has to
it can't be that fantastic. If not, you would have kind of thinking, oh my God, like, imagine that would really hit me hard. That would hit me hard. How did you come back from that?
Like you do what everyone does in a situation like that. You go home, you lick your wounds for a couple of days and you feel a bit sorry, and then you get on with it. Like, what else can you do? So I did, I think, 2 sessions of that. And then I thought, bugger this. Like, honestly, I can be wasting years here. And I didn't really want to do another rewrite. There's always people telling you, oh, you could do this and you could do that to sort of, elevate your manuscript a little bit. And, to be fair, they might be right. But I was like, I paid the editor. The editor was super happy with it. And she had a PhD in writing and published many books. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to self-publish. And that's when I again sort of looked at the options, and I really wanted to bring out the book to book industry standard. So, a lot of people, you can publish through Amazon and you can upload pretty much a Word document and you can be published with a print and an ebook within 48 hours. It's no problem. And it's really cheap. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted my book to be published in a way so it would look great, it would feel great, and it would be comparative to any book that's put out by a traditional publisher. That was just, I guess, my personal desire and my project. So I hired a lady who had worked in the publishing industry for about 20 years, and she sort of made sure that everything was packaged in the way it's supposed to be. I found HarperCollins book designer who was on maternity leave. So that was a major coup. Like, she's got so many awards, and I just got in at the right time. And so she designed the cover and also the interior of the book. And who else did I think that's it for the publishing. So then I had someone else convert it into an ebook, and that took me right up until the 22nd of June last year, when the book was brought out. And after that, I also then engaged a publicity agent, I guess a freelancer. So she helped me to sort of kickstart all the media campaign, because the problem nowadays is, millions of self-published books get out there, aside from all the traditionally published books that anyway get promoted through the publishing houses. So if you publish your book, no one's going to see it. So really then the work begins to actually promote your book and make people see the book. And then, you have to shape your content in a way, or your present in a way that intrigues people, so they're actually willing to spend the money on your book.
and that leads me directly into the next question. Where can people obtain your book should they want to do it?
So look, the easiest is probably to head to my website or on Instagram. So the website is reginapetrameyer.com. So Meyer is Meyer. And the Instagram handle is Regina Petra Meyer, same. And I have the links there. So from my website, you can actually buy a signed copy from the website, and I'll send it to you. Or you can buy it in any online bookshop as an ebook, or you can order it through Amazon or wherever you buy your print books online. So Booktopia has it, Book Depository has it. So it is pretty straightforward to get it, I hope.
Excellent.
So yeah, that's the website.
Okay, and it's pretty cool. So I do recommend this. Website. That's how you kind of like spell it there.
That's right.
Wow. Well,
you know, and that's another thing now that you brought up the website. So of course, you know, the whole, once you start looking at promoting your book, you need to have your online presence, right?
Yeah.
So you have to get a proper website, you have to get a shop, you have to organize all of this well in advance of actually getting the book out. So to be honest, you know, I guess publishing was involved, but the marketing side and the publicity side of it, that was in man hours a lot more work. You know, to get everything up and going, to put the pitches out there and to follow up. So yeah, but see, I actually enjoy learning, like whether it's a new software or a new process or, you know, something like publicity and marketing. I really think for me it's interesting, and I'm really growing my personal toolkit, and that's how I look at it. It's really an immersive experience of learning new skills.
Kind of Swiss, if I may make the observation there. And you know, I'm getting a degree of your character. Not only are you big on self-development, but you're very methodical, which is I associate that with the clockwork Swiss. It's kind of cool. But I suppose leading up into, I'm really interested in your insights. You've given us some of the lessons learned there. But what brought you to Australia? I mean, the country is seriously. I don't want to sound trite, but the country is actually better for having you here. And I fantastic that we're getting these magnificent people moving over here. But why leave a beautiful country like Switzerland? That's a well-run, wonderful place, and come here. I mean, it's a great country. I love my country. Don't get me, but it's kind of different from Switzerland.
Well, I think there's several answers to that. So I think there's three major ones. First one being because I can, Second one was because I like traveling and I like exploring, and I always wanted to live somewhere else. And the third one is, like I mentioned, my relationship with my parents was very complicated at some point, and I needed distance. And because I am a bit impulsive, I went to the furthest part possible. So we actually were looking at New Zealand. We wanted to go to New Zealand, but at the time, the way the immigration systems were set up in New Zealand, you had to prove you had money, which we didn't have. And Australia had a different system, which I found was actually much more equal for people that were applying. It didn't ask for money, but the condition was you could get your skilled migration, but you weren't eligible for any government help for 2 years. So basically, you can come, you can give it a shot. If it works out, it's great, you can stay. And if it doesn't work out, you have to go home. And I thought, that's really fair. And it's a really incentive to make things work. And so that's why we decided to come to Australia. And I did later move to New Zealand. And I wasn't actually very comfortable there. We were also in a not very pretty region. We were in Palmerston North, which, is
awkward.
Yeah. So that's what took us to Australia. And I've lived in Cape Tribulation, in Byron Bay, in Adelaide, and I've traveled all around the country. I think I am probably more passionate about the Australian landscape and its people than many an Australian, because I've seen it and I've chosen it.
All right. Well, mate, this has been great. Have you got any insights for the good viewers and listeners of Northern Vibe that you want to leave us with?
Look, I think if I can tell people anything, it's to follow their dreams. I think often we are a bit afraid of stepping out of our comfort zone, and we deliberate at great lengths about the what ifs. And I think in my experience, once I stepped out of the comfort zone, it was actually a lot easier than I expected. And, you know, there's nothing like doing something that you've always wanted to do, and it makes you feel alive and it makes you feel fulfilled. And I think, you know, just it doesn't have to be you know, a travel adventure. So this can also be publishing like I did, also a book, or it can be starting a new business, or just whatever you have in mind, you know, take a step towards it and make a go of it.
Yeah, starting and raising a family. God, that's a
Yeah,
in and of.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, my brother's got twins, and just watching those boys grow up, like, you know, the joy that they're getting out of that. Well, look,
Yeah.
thank you so much